Should we have a type? Some of us have our list or we have boxes that we'd like to check off. For us guys, maybe we're looking for blonde hair, blue eyes. Maybe these ladies are looking for a tall, dark, and handsome fella. Maybe we require that they're on the worship team, or maybe they should have an established career. But are all these things something that us believers, us kingdom minded people should have on this other person, like expectation wise? On today's episode of the Dazed and Confused in the dating pool, but it doesn't have to be that way podcast, Rachel and I are going to talk about this topic.
Woo!
Yes, ma'am.
So, our little caveat in the beginning, we are not dating experts. We don't pretend to be. We are two Christian friends being raw, real, and vulnerable with you, sharing our journeys of dating and how we are learning to honor God and others in the process. What we're going to share here tonight, these are our own thoughts and observations and experiences and all that kind of stuff. You take it and you sit with it and you talk to the Lord about it and see what you hear from you or from you for you from him, because that's at the
Mhm.
end of the day, that's what really matters.
Yes. All right. So I'm gonna kick it off.
Kick it
So for me, a little while back, I had a pretty young thing. She was pretty young and a thing. So pretty much, I met this girl on a dating app, but instead of waiting for us to match, I was like, hey, she put her Instagram handle there. So I was like, let me just shoot my shot, slide in the DMs. Uh, so I did. She responded, and then yeah, one thing led to another where she was like, or I asked for her number. She gave it to me. We talked on the phone, and then we FaceTime, and then yeah, we ended up meeting in person. So things went really well. Um, how do I say this? We did kind of like pass some physical boundaries, so that might have like clouded some of our judgment and our thoughts, but I think that's a topic for a different episode. But we noticed that in the relationship we were going back and forth where we'd hang out, things were awesome, we'd have a great time, and then we'd go about do our thing on a Sunday, go to church, and then she would kind of feel convicted and be like, "Hey, like we shouldn't be doing this." So then, I just kind of want to honor what she's feeling in the moment. So I was like, "Okay, like let's not do it." And then a day goes by, she's like, "Hey, I miss you. I can't do this." And I was like, "All right, like let's work on it. Like, let's work through it together. So again, we hang out, it's amazing, and then the following day it's like, no, let's just be friends. So it kind of like for 4 weeks, maybe a month and a half, like that was the pattern of our relationship. And to me, I was just like, man, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Like, I don't know if it's because she's Latina and Latinas are known to be like hot and cold. I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments below if that's a thing or not. Or if it's just
No
women in general.
stereotypes, Mickler.
No, no, no. Wait. Say that again.
I was like, no stereotypes on this podcast.
Okay, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So just people in general could be hot and cold, right? It doesn't have to be a people group. I retract that. Okay. So with that, a buddy of mine like followed up with me. He was like, "Hey, like what happened to that beautiful young Latina that you were talking with? It seemed like things were going amazing." So I just explained my side of things where I was like, "Hey, like we kind of were just going back and forth on things. I tried to communicate with her. She tried to communicate with me, and I just felt like it didn't work out. So I just didn't want to move forward with it." And he kind of pressed back on me and he was like, well, what if like that was what God was wanting you to work on in the relationship with her? And I was like, oh, I, that's a good question. I don't know. So I almost came to the idea of like I was blaming her and saying that she was immature, but what if in reality I was being premature and I didn't give the relationship more time and attention to kind of bloom and blossom? Rachel, she's
I
ready.
have
She wants to,
thoughts.
she wants to say
No,
something.
I have thoughts.
Okay, should I share what John says first or your thought first?
Well,
No, go.
let me get this out.
Okay.
So, Proverbs says that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, there are things that you can work through together in a relationship. There's also two people involved in the relationship, and each person has to make their own decisions and choices have outcomes. And honestly, like, now that I hear you tell the rest of the story, because we didn't talk about all of this offline, um, that to me would be a huge red flag. If the person that I was in a relationship with was like, well, this is good. No, I just want to be friends. Well, this is good. No, no. Because a double-minded man or a double-minded woman is unstable in all his ways or all her ways. And
Mm-hmm.
like you can't build a solid foundation for anything with double-mindedness. You
Mm.
know, it reminds me of that verse, like, I wish you were hot or cold. Like if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. And so I think that I think there's a place for working through things in a relationship, but communication is huge. And I think even bigger, because originally we were going to talk about the communication piece of this. Like, communication is huge. That's a non negotiable for me. Like, if there's not clear communication, then you don't have a relationship. It's just not possible. But in this particular story, like, double mindedness is not something that you can move forward with. I personally would not move forward with double mindedness because, like, you're just gonna end up what it does is it puts you in a yo-yo pattern, and it's not helpful for you or for them because at some point somebody has to make up their mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Yeah.
like, does she just want to be friends or does she want to be in a relationship? Do you just want to be friends or do you want to be in a relationship? If you're constantly going back and forth, then you're in all this ambiguity. Sorry, that was a hard
Mm-hmm.
word for me to say, apparently. Ambiguity, and nothing good comes from that, right? Clarity is kindness. And you can move forward with clarity. You can't move forward with confusion. And so I feel like the situation that you were in, um, just to give you maybe a little more credit than you were giving yourself, is you were in a situation where there was a lot of confusion swirling around. And like you said, maybe there were some things that you guys did that impacted that. But
Mm-hmm.
the point is, there was still confusion there. And so, as you know, as a man leading the relationship, I can totally understand why you didn't want to move forward because nobody wants to move forward with confusion. Like that will get you nowhere fast. So I just want to push back a little bit on what your friend said because I think that there's a balance, and I know I'm going a little longer on this soapbox, but I'm almost done. Um, there's a balance between these are things to work through together, and this is a behavior that's not helpful to the relationship. And I think we have to be really, really clear about that no matter what anybody else says.
Dang. But yeah, so I guess the struggle is to discern which of it is, like, hey, is this an opportunity for me to grow more in Christ's love, understanding, mercy, forgiveness type of
No,
thing?
because you're also not a doormat. You're not a
Mm,
doormat.
you're
God's
right.
not wishy-washy with us. God's not wishy-washy with us. Like, at some point, you have to make a decision whether you're choosing Jesus or not.
Yes,
Like,
1000%.
there is no, I mean, yes, like, he has tons of patience and love is patient, but I think we also have to be really careful because sometimes as believers, we go into it with this mindset of love is patient, and it causes us to stay in relationship cycles that are actually harmful, that are keeping both us and the person we're in that relationship with from the ability to move forward. And so the healthiest thing to do is end it so that both people can move forward. So I just think we have to be really, really careful about that because there is grace and there is patience, and we're going to talk about that in this episode. There's a difference between growing together and I'm not even quite sure the right word I'm looking for, but growing together, maturing together, like those things that you work through together, and the difference of somebody's unhealthy mindsets and behavior patterns and not letting somebody else's actions keep you stuck, which is true for whether you're the girl. That's my 2 cents.
No, that's valid. That is valid. Very valid. Okay.
Because
Okay.
that could be a really toxic behavior long term. I mean, what else could that transfer over into
Hmm.
in other areas of her life? And like you're saying, and we're not knocking the girl, but like whenever, doesn't matter who you are, whenever anybody is double-minded about something, they're probably double-minded about other things as well. And I don't know, I just listen to me say, when you're double-minded, I don't know. Hashtag irony. No, but I think that I just think, like you said, in her case, she was young, so she was probably figuring things out herself, which is okay. But then make a decision and say, you know what, I'm still kind of figuring out what I want right now. So let's just be friends and see what, if anything develops moving forward, rather than putting you, because what her actions did, and I think that's kind of what it comes down to, is when her actions are impacting you and putting you in this back and forth yo yo tug of war kind of thing, like that's not fair to you.
Mm,
So that's where I would probably draw the line.
yeah. No, I feel good for drawing the line then.
I think you did. And I think an important thing to note is like, I think we have to be really careful about outside input because they're not in a relationship.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. I agree.
So, anyway, why don't you go ahead and bring us to the question that inspired this episode this week?
I know, right? Okay. So it was from John, and I think it kind of goes along with what we're trying to talk about today. So he said, actually, before I say it, um, you guys, if you have ideas and stuff like that, we listen to all the feedback. And if you guys have questions or any topics that you want us to talk about, send it over because we'd love to talk
What
about it.
inspired this episode today?
Yeah. Okay. So John said, sometimes I wonder in our quest to find that perfect boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, or wife, we put too much pressure on ourselves that all the boxes need to be checked. He said, interested in your take on settling for possibly a few boxes unchecked. I guess it depends on which boxes those are. Might be a good future discussion for your video series. He said, in my experience, I feel some potentially good relationships ended a little too soon and could have turned into something more if it weren't for requiring that all boxes were checked.
It's a great question. Thank you, John. And again, if you have questions, please send them our way because we want to know. We're here to share this journey that we're on with you, for you. So whatever would be helpful to hear, let us know. So I think that this is such a good question, and I feel like there's so much gray area. So I'm excited to dive into it. So um, I think that what it really comes down to is what you pointed out, John, as far as like which boxes are unchecked. I think that's what it is for me because I will say that I do have very high standards. And in the past, I probably had some standards that were unrealistic. And it was like, okay, so, I need to see this, and then maybe I'll consider it. And that probably caused me to pass a lot of guys up, just to be honest. So I think that that's unhealthy. I also think, I found this quote this week and I just loved it. And it said, someday someone will find you and not want to change you. Somebody will find you and not want to rush you. They will, something like, celebrate the magic of who you are presently. And as somebody who is very growth minded, I love this topic because I think that, the reality is that who you are today isn't who you're going to be 10 years from now. And the relationship that you have today isn't going to be the same 10 years from now. And you get input into how that changes. The reality is it is going to change and it is going to grow because people are supposed to grow. We're not supposed to be the same people our entire lives. Like we should constantly be growing and learning and working on ourselves and all of that. Like I'm a huge, 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 huge fan of personal development, and I know you are as well, Mickler. And so I think that it's really, really important to understand that you will change and you will grow and you will work on things together in your relationship. You will work on things individually. And I love how one of my friends put it when we were having a conversation about this week. She said, she found this quote that she loved. Is she was like, I want to work on me while you work on you, and we're doing it side by side. We're doing it together. I totally butchered that quote, but I love it because that's really what life is. That really is what relationships are, right? Like, I'm going to work on me, you work on you, and we're doing this side by side, and we're going to grow together. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, and that's definitely something that I want in my life and in my relationships. And so I think that this idea of growing together and maturing together is an important one, because the reality is that there just is not perfection this side of heaven. You're just not going to find it. And I see so many people holding out for their idea of perfection or checking all the boxes or whatever. And I do think, to John's point, I do think that people miss out as a result. You know, whatever that box might be. I've seen people, leave boxes unchecked for everything from height to location to whether or not they love sport, like just stupid stuff. Can I be honest? Whether or not that person likes the same sports team as you is not going to matter when the rubber hits the road. It's not. And so, like, and that's really not what marriage is about. Like, I think that we overcomplicate it way more than we need to. And at the end of the day, like, who do you enjoy spending time with? Who are you on the same page with? Who do you want to build a life with? Like, those are the things that matter. And so when I think about boxes checked versus unchecked, I think a lot of what I see in the dating landscape in general is people being super, super picky, or they had their list that they made 10 years ago, and this is who they want. Well, you're not the same person that you were 10 years ago. And the way that I look at it is that God knows who I need now and who I will need in the future. And so I trust him to bring me the right man who is who I need now and in the future as we grow together. And so I think that if you're waiting for like angels to sing and everything to align and this is just beautiful and perfect and there's not a flaw, like, you're probably not going to get married because it just does not exist. Like, there's no such thing as perfection in relationship or marriage or any of that. So there is this delicate balance, right, of giving people grace and, like, can you love this person's quirks? Can you love this person with all their quirks? Because being in a relationship doesn't make those quirks go away. Being in a marriage sure as heck doesn't make them go away. It amplifies it. So can you love this person as they are now and love who they are becoming? And I think that's really, really important. So on the one hand, I would say, yeah, it's okay to have some boxes unchecked. Um, and like loosen up your grip on your idea of what like the perfect person has to look like, has to be, has to do for a living, has to whatever, fill in the blank. I've seen all kinds of crazy requirements, And so I think that we do have to like be a little bit more open-minded, because a lot of times in my life, like, what God has for you doesn't always come packaged like you expect. And so if we don't have an open mind, we'll miss it. So I think there's one hand. I do think on the flip side of it, you do have to know what your non-negotiables are. And I think that God cares about the details and he cares about the things that we care about and the desires of our heart. And I don't think there's anything wrong with making a list. I actually think it's a healthy thing as long as you give that list to God and say, hey, Lord, you know that these are the desires of my heart. And I believe that you've given these to me for a reason. And also, I just give this list to you and you bring me the person that you know I need now and in the future, whether or not they need this list. But I just submit this list to you that these are the desires of my heart. And I really believe that God cares about what we care about. And so I think that that matters. So I do think it's okay to have some boxes, and it's so important to have your non-negotiables and know what those are. And if those are not checked, like, then that's a big mistake in my mind, because at some point you're going to end up regretting and being resentful, and that is detrimental to any relationship. So that's kind of my hot take on it, is like, let go of this idea of what your perfect person has to be and see the person in front of you for who they are. Do you have a good time with them? Do you have fun with them? Do you enjoy the everyday stuff together? Because life is about the everyday, not just the mountaintops, right? Are you on the same page about the things that matter to you? Do you want to build a life with this person? And can you love who they are now and who they are becoming, by the way, without trying to change them? Oh, I'm going to go off on a soapbox for a minute, because like, I know what it's like to be in a relationship where somebody tries to change you and it sucks. And you wake up every morning feeling like not enough. Like, oh, well, if I could change, then I would be the person that they wish that I would be. That's a terrible feeling. Nobody should live that way, by the way. And so, why do we do that? Even in little subconscious ways, why do we do that to others? Like, if I am not free to be fully myself and the man I'm with is not fully free to be himself, then what are we doing? What's the point? You know, like Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed. And that's what I want in my marriage on multiple levels, right? And so it's just this idea that I have nothing to prove, nothing to hide, and nothing to fear. And so if I am not free to show up that way, fully myself, who I am, and be loved and celebrated and honored and valued and cherished for who I am, then I don't want it. And I don't want that for him either. If he's not free to be fully who he is, quirks and all. Like, when I say yes to the man that I marry, I'm saying yes to all of who he is. Quirks, all of it, right? And so if he's not free to be all of who he is, then we don't have a real relationship. And that's not the kind of relationship that I want. And so in order for there to be real intimacy and real transparency and real vulnerability and all of the things that make a marriage so powerful and so beautiful, there has to be authenticity. There has to be freedom to be who we are. And that includes the scars and the dents and the scuffs. And if the scars and the dents and the scuffs are boxes that are now unchecked on your list, that are non-negotiables, that are keeping you from seeing the person in front of you as who they really are, then you could miss out. Now, on the flip side, if those are non-negotiables for you, then that is a serious decision that you have to make, because the reality is that all of those things come with you into marriage. They just don't magically disappear the day that you say I do. You know, that's when the real adventure begins. So I think that we just have to look at the big picture when it comes to this question. And I've said a lot, so I will ping it back to you, Mickler.
Yeah, no, I love how you talked about the fact that like we're not going to be the same person 10 years from now, and we weren't the same person 10 years ago. Like for me, like I was considered like a homebody. Like I just wanted to stay home and just do my thing type of guy, play video games in a sense. And it was only until the past few years where I started doing more outdoorsy things. Like I started enjoying going to the beach. I started enjoying hiking. I started doing like mountain biking. And that's how I got this scar right here. Yes, because I was going full send uh paintballing, you know? But I love how you said like I think some of us put a pressure to like the same things that other person likes, and if we don't, then we kind of cut it off already. And you said like, oh, the sports teams, like if they like, you know, a different team from the, I obviously don't watch sports, that's why I'm like whatever, Lakers and the Heat, like if you guys don't,
my favorite sports team, go beat the opponent soundly in the skirmish.
yeah,
Get the goal basket. Bonus points if you know where that's from. Yeah, that's me. That's literally me in sports.
Yeah, no, but like I think if you, like you mentioned, like if you enjoy the person's company, like you'll start to learn to like the things that they like. Like if the girl's all about gardening, like, hey, the guy will be like, hey, like, what is that? You know, they'll show genuine interest of like learning those things. or if the guy's into like chess or whatever, like he can do his thing. She doesn't have to be a chess player, but she can, show interest and maybe even support him in that
And
sense.
yeah, I'm just gonna jump in there. Like, it's healthy for you to have different interests.
Mm.
It gives you something to learn. It gives you something to talk about. Like, it's okay if you don't like the same thing on your pizza. This is not a make or break. And these are honestly things that I've seen people be like, oh, well, I don't know if I could go out with somebody because of that. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
No way, you lied.
No, I'm not.
What they order on their pizza was a red flag.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's some kind of ridiculous stuff out there, and and then there's some serious stuff. So again, you have to know what's a non-negotiable for you and what isn't. But anyway, just to your point, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I did.
No, it's a conversation.
I think it's so. Here's the thing. It is healthy to have friendships outside of marriage. It is healthy to have hobbies outside of your marriage. It is healthy to have, interests outside of your marriage, each of you. And then when you come back together, you can talk about it and you can share things with each other and you can learn and you can go to the football game with him, even if you don't love it. And then he can come to your, maybe not your knitting circle with you. That might be a little big ass, but like, but he can garden tomatoes with you or whatever. Like, I think it keeps things interesting. I think it keeps the relationship dynamic interesting. Like, I see so much in it that's so good. And like, so I'll share an example, not from my own life, but from my family. So my grandpa's amazing. I miss him dearly. He's graduated to heaven several years ago. But he loved bowling and golf, and he was the football coach, and he was like all into sports and whatever. And my grandma, my first grandma, didn't have that in common with him. And so, like, he would go do that and then come home, and like, I will say that she didn't have that in common with him, and she didn't take an interest in it. Now, when he got remarried to my grandma now, she took interest in that. And they didn't have all the same things. And so they had some things in common. They both had a love of music. They both played the organ in the church. They both had, very similar interests there. But she went off, to her book club and her coffee club and whatever while he went and did golf. And then she'd meet up with him at the golf club and they'd have lunch and whatever. And he would do his bowling night and she would go be in her lady circle and whatever, and then come home and they talk about it. And so I think it's healthy to have different interests and take an interest in what each other likes, even if you don't have the same thing. Now, there are some things that I think it is important to be on the same page about because they kind of drive a lot of how you live your life, right? So, like for me, and I know for you too, Mickler, like one of those things for me is health and fitness and nutrition because I'm super intentional about how I steward my body and it impacts how I cook. Well, guess what? If you're in a relationship with somebody, you're cooking for them and you're going to eat the same thing. And so if you want to eat, healthy and you want to make your food from scratch and whatever, and the person is bringing home Doritos all the time, like it's just at some point there's going to be tension. And so I'm not going to say that's necessarily a deal breaker, but for me, it kind of is. Like it's important, and if you're the one stewarding your body and the other person's laying around all day and not doing anything, like I think there are things in life that it's important to be on the same page about, but it doesn't mean that you both have to go to the same CrossFit gym. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
it's okay to have differences there as long as you jive, as long as there's still that sense of companionship, because again, at the end of the day, do you enjoy spending your life with this person? That's a big deal. And do you see a future with this person? And do you see walking through hard times together as well as the fun times? And do you have fun together and all of that? So that was a long interruption. Your turn.
No, okay, so I'm intrigued by what are these things that we will like if the box is not checked, we're like, hey, like it's a no-go.
Okay.
So like, okay, hobby wise, we said a couple, you know, I
Yeah.
think we've established like, hey, we can learn to like, you know, what the other person is doing. And it's healthy that the other person has different interests, you know? So that's a good thing. Okay. We established
Yeah.
that. What about physical?
Oh, I will share one of the stupidest ones, okay?
Let's
That
go.
I see women write men off for their height. And I think that is so stupid. Because
Really?
first of
I didn't
all,
even.
yeah, you've never experienced that.
Short kings, stand up, literally, because we're too short. We need to stand tall. I'm just kidding.
No. And see, this is why I hate that one because first of all, I mean, I'm 5 foot tall when the sun is shining, so I get it. But also, like, first of all, he has no control over how tall he is. And a person's height tells you nothing about his character.
Yeah.
For me, it's about his presence. How does he carry himself? I can tell you that I have felt like I was in the presence of a boy with a man over 6 feet, and I have felt in the presence of a man who was 5'5".
Let's go.
So I just think that like if that's really what you're gonna get hung up with. That's really what you're gonna get hung up on. Like of all of these things, and he's an amazing guy, and his character speaks for itself, and you're gonna write him off because his height doesn't fit your type. What do you want? You know, I mean, there's like that meme going around, that's Jesus, and this girl's praying like, Jesus, send me a good man. He's like, I did, and you told me he was too short. I think personally, as a woman, I feel like I have seen so many women write guys off because of their height, which to me is the stupidest thing to write someone off for. And again, I'm probably a little more sensitive to that being short myself, but seriously, like, do you feel in the presence of a man when you're with him? I don't care how tall he is. Like I said, like he could be 6'5" and a total jerk, or he could be totally immature, or any of these things. And like I said, I have felt in the presence of a man with a man who is 5'5", with a man who is 5'6". And like that's to me what matters way more than some stupid height criteria. And I get really hyped up on that because I see way too many women write guys off for that. So
No, thanks for advocating for us. Appreciate it, Rachel.
I
Go
got
look
you.
it out. um, yeah, no. So it's interesting because I was watching on a different podcast. It's like a dating thing. I forgot the name, but pretty much they blindfold themselves and they're on stage and they're talking and
I've
stuff.
heard
It's
about
it's
this.
like a worldly one,
Yeah.
But pretty much like
Is it Love is Blind?
no, not the show. It's not it's on a YouTube channel.
Oh,
But
okay.
I've watched a couple of those episodes, which is pretty funny too. But no, this one episode, it was like the couple on stage, like they were vibing, they had a lot of chemistry, they related really well. And as soon as the girl found out that he was like 5'9" and she was like 5'10" or something, she was like, I can't do it because if I wear heels, I'm 6'2" and I'm looking. But it was like, wait, you guys had this connection, like you're gonna write them off because of that, And yeah, it's interesting then that you bring that up because in the past, like there was this one girl that I dated and I like really, really liked her. And she was 5'7", I'm 5'4". But I was like, wow, I'm glad that she gave me the opportunity. So now I'm like wondering if was it a height thing? Like, because like, like I don't know why is
Interesting.
yeah.
We'll
Like
never
blind.
know.
Yeah. I gotta unpack that for myself. But it was cool to see that. And like I don't mind it either, like being around a taller woman. But it's like I don't know if I get those opportunities. Like especially on a dating app. If you put your height there, it was like
Oh
I
yeah,
think guys
they'll
and girls
read
were
you
just
off.
like, yeah.
So I just think honestly, I think that's such a superficial thing to write somebody off for. I do. And like, I mean, I get it. No, I don't. I was like, no, I don't. Because again, like, To me, it's all about how the man carries himself and how his presence is in the room and how he makes you feel. Do you feel safe with him? Do you feel in the presence of a man? Like, I just think that a man conveys his strength in so many ways, and your height doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, your character matters way more than your height anyway.
Mm,
So, like, are you going to date somebody just because they're the right height and this other guy has incredible character and he's what you've prayed for in a man, but because he doesn't meet your height standard, you're going to write him off? To me, that's such a stupid thing. Like, it's not going to matter when you're in your 80s. You know what I mean? Like,
mm.
it's not.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not. And you're not just in a relationship for today. Like, as believers, we are kingdom minded, we are marriage minded, we are legacy minded. Like,
Mm,
when you're both 95 or whatever age you happen to be, like, it's not going to matter how tall either one of you are, because you're probably both going to, I'm not going to say that. No, I want to be in the prime of my life. Come on.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
so like, I think that these things we get hung up on just don't matter, or like, oh, well, my type is, blonde haired, blue eyed, and he's not that. Who gives a rip? Like, if you genuinely don't find him attractive, okay, I get that. But if you're not willing to see him with eyes that could be attracted to him just because he's not your type, like,
Hmm. Yeah, I think I've been recently convicted on that idea and that concept because I'm like, guys will say like, "Hey, what is your type?" And like we've talked about this, is like guys are physically attracted to women. So it was like, "Oh yeah, I tend to like Latinas or white girls. Like green eyes, if you got green eyes, like yo, like let's go."
all you green eyed ladies, you deserve that.
She'll be a DM.
The Mickler idea.
And if you're 5'7", I'm for it. No, but
He'll buy you
I,
heels.
yeah, exactly. I think I've been convicted on that idea because it was like what we mentioned, like what is her character like? Like, does she have the being of like a godly woman, And sometimes I could write someone off because she doesn't fit that physical kind of you know, type that I have.
Yeah.
But I want to bring up this, and this might be a little controversial, so, but I
Let's
say we should
go.
just do it.
Go.
Okay, so what about the guys who want like a fit woman? Because I know you talked about like lifestyle wise, that's a thing. But say if a woman has a few extra pounds, like what if the guy just kind of overlooks it? Are we not giving them the opportunity and chance as well?
Mm.
So
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think this is a tough one. I think, first of all, appearances change. Like,
yes,
somebody's
yeah.
appearance that they have today is not going to be the appearance that they have 10 years from now, for better, for worse. And so I think that can be superficial. There is an element of like, okay, so for me, again, being active, having a healthy lifestyle, being able to enjoy hiking and spending time outside and doing things like that matters a good deal to me. And I've had guys be interested in me who I didn't see that in their life. And that to me was a turnoff. And I was not interested to pursue any further because, as somebody who is very young for my age and very active, and like being able to be active and be active with my husband is something that's very important to me. If I'm living my life, obviously everybody has to make their own choices in life, but if I'm living my life with an intentionality that I don't see in yours, why would I want to partner my life with that? And and then you could turn around and flip the mirror back on myself. So I think there's a lot to be said for the adage, you attract what you are. And like, if this is what you want, in a person, then are you being the kind of person, are you right now the kind of person that attracts that kind of person? That was a lot of kind of persons. But
Yeah.
you know, so like for me, like I said, like some guys have been interested and slid into my DMs or whatever. And I was like, you seem really cool, but I just don't see it because we're not like that's something that matters to me. And it's not just about your external appearance, though, let's be honest, attraction matters, right? There are kind ways to go about it. You can see episode 2 of our podcast. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Um, and yet at the same time, that's a real thing. And so there's that. But then there's the deeper underlying issue. And so if somebody is just not taking care of themselves, if they just don't care, if that's not important to them and it's important to you, some people might call that superficial, but I don't think it is because it has to do with how you approach your life, how you live your life. It's going to impact other decisions that you make. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, I think like I want to be the person to be like, no, that's superficial. Like guys shouldn't do that, whatever. And yet at the same time, I have to grapple with the fact that there is some substance there because when the shoe is on my foot, I have passed over guys for that reason.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, no, I think I like how you mentioned that it can be superficial. I feel like for us guys, when we put that standard on the girl, but we don't meet it ourselves, that's when it's like an issue. You know, like we have this thing like she needs to be like a model, you know, but then we're, 300 pounds type of guy. It's like, wait, like, I don't know. Like, if I, I feel like that's superficial.
no,
Go
I
ahead.
don't think it is. Like, and I can't believe that I, of all people, am saying this, but I honestly don't think it is because obviously physical attraction does matter. It is part of it. Um, but I think it, well, and for everything that we're saying, there's exceptions to the rule, right? There's all kinds of stories of opposites attract and whatever. And so I don't think there's a one size fits all. But I also think that you have to be honest and you have to be realistic about how important that is for you. And
Mm.
I think that goes back to some of those boxes, right? Like, is this a non negotiable for you? If it's a deal breaker, it's a deal breaker. And I don't know that that's superficial or right or wrong. The truth is, that's what it is for you. And you need to know that. And then if that's not for you, then you need to know that too. So this one community that I'm part of, I feel so bad sometimes for the questions that the guys get asked. And then they answer honestly. And then the girls just like jump all over them. Like, well, you asked them to be honest. So, sometimes I see those questions and I was like, no man in his right mind is going to line up for that firing squad, know? But it is what it is. It is what it is. And so obviously, like, man looks at the outward appearance, God looks at the heart.
Mhm.
And that's truly what matters. At the same time, man looks on the outward appearance. And I think another way that I would phrase this is like, if you go to a job interview, appearance matters. If you're meeting somebody on the street, if you're meeting somebody in a position of leadership, like, I just think that there are plenty of examples where appearance matters and it's not superficial. Like it communicates how you're showing up in the world. Now, on the flip side, if that person, just because you use the example, if that woman might not look like a model, but she is super intentional about her health and maybe her body is just built different, I think that's a different story, right?
Yeah,
Or the
yeah,
same
yeah,
for
yeah.
a guy. Like, so to me, we're not just talking about the external. I think if we were just talking about appearance, that would be superficial because
Mhm.
externals change.
Yep.
So for better, for worse, right? And so I think that would be superficial. But I think that how somebody appears, not always, definitely not always, can be a reflection of how they live their life. So
Mhm.
for me, it's how they steward themselves and how they live their life that matters more. And so, yeah, that's not always reflected on the outside, but a lot of times it is. And I find Like, I know some women who don't fit the model stereotype, but they're super into fitness and they're super intentional with how they take care of themselves. And they show up with excellence in life. And like, I kind of think a guy would be a fool to pass him up, you know? So, I, yeah, I guess I'm kind of answering my question and then like contradicting it in the same sentence. But I just think you have to know what's important to you and what you value. But I do think that you have to get to know the person more than just the outside. Now, that doesn't mean you have to swipe right. Which way is it? Swipe right, right? I don't, I don't swipe, so I don't know. But it doesn't mean that you have to like swipe right on every person just to give them a chance. Like, you'll know if you feel some kind of connection there, interest there or not. And if you don't, it's okay. You don't have to be attracted to everybody in the whole world. You're not trying to meet everybody. You're not trying to match everybody. Like, man, I heard somebody recently say, like, oh, I just feel like I'm not getting that many like matches and I'm just not getting da da da. I'm like, how many do you want? I'm not saying that like more is a terrible thing, but I'm saying like you're really only going after one. So if you're getting quality matches, why does it matter if you're getting 3 or 300? You know, like 3 is a lot easier to sort through. Maybe you should be grateful. So anyway,
Yeah, no, I agree, because like
Mhm.
I think for me, when someone is living that lifestyle, it's an indicator of what they value, you know? So like, and are they willing to do the things that are uncomfortable? Are they willing to discipline themselves, you know? Like, are they willing to regulate their emotions instead of like using food to, you know, do these like, yeah, cope, you know? I think it shows that more so than the like what we mentioned, where it's like a superficial, like, hey, you need to look like this certain way.
Yes.
So having the lifestyle of being active and fit is a part of like my box. um
And that's okay because that's a non-negotiable for you. And it makes sense. You're a health coach. You know, like it just makes sense. Like this is something that is a big part of your life. It matters to you. And so it makes sense that it matters in your spouse. I don't write you off as being because I know you more and I know your character. Like I know that you're not only looking for the external. And I think that's kind of what I was convolutedly trying to say is I think it depends on whether that's just external for you or not.
yeah,
If
yeah.
it's just external for you, then you could be missing out. But like you were saying, like, yeah, when somebody is into fitness, like it definitely shows there's discipline in their life, there's self control in their life. They care about improving themselves, they're growth minded, they're willing to put in the work, they're not afraid to challenge themselves. Like they care about how they take care of themselves, like all of those things. That's not an external only.
Yeah.
So I do think that can be a reflection of character and is a reflection of character. So I want to touch on another box. And I know this one is a little sensitive and everybody feels a little differently about it. So you have to know what's right for you. But I know a big box is age. If the person's too old, if the person's too young, like you write them off. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I think, again, it comes down to what is important for you and where are you at in life. You know, I know some people, I know a couple who is very happily married and there is a 20-year age difference between them.
Is the woman a cougar or not? Just kidding. Okay,
No,
so this is 28 20 years age
no,
gap.
no, he's older. He's older. And like I but when I see them, I don't see that. You know why? Because they're both super active, they're both super fit, they're both like they're
Wow.
so on the same page in life, personal development, growth, entrepreneurship. Like they are so on the same page. They are such a good match for each other. Now, I personally have no interest in that big an age gap. Like that's way bigger than I would ever do. But for them, it works. So that's why I think you have to know what's right for you. And is this a non negotiable for you? So I had a Christian matchmaking agency reach out to me and they're like, oh, we think you would be such a good match for our clients. And I was like, okay. And so we started talking and they're like, oh, well, what age range, would you be open to? And I told them, they're like, oh, well, our clients are outside of that and they really want to have children. And honestly, for me, I was like, ew, no, I'm not going to be some old guy's baby mama. Like, and
Why not? Why not?
no, heck no. Ugh, I was like so grossed out by it. I was like, please don't contact me ever again. I didn't say that, but I was thinking that, like, oh, no. So, and that's me. And there are other women who might be like, yes, I want to get to know him. And that's not right or wrong. You just have to know what a non-negotiable is for you. And like I've had older guys approach me. And honestly, because I am so young for my age and I live a very young lifestyle, like I've said no thank you because of that, because I'm not just looking at today. I'm looking at 20 years from now. I'm looking at 30 years from now. And obviously, none of us knows the future, only God does. But when I think about who I want to spend my life with, who I want to partner my life with, like I want to go into it with the understanding that we can be doing life together. Now, obviously, like God knows what's going to unfold. But as much as I have say into it, like that is something that matters to me.
Mm.
And then on the flip side, like somebody much younger in life hasn't walked through the things that I have. They don't have the same experiences that I have. And that matters to me in how they would show up in a marriage, especially as the man in the relationship. So again, there are some women for whom that's not a deal breaker. It's not an issue. So I just think you have to know what the non negotiable boxes are for you. And that's unique to each person.
Okay, so your case was like some people will write the other person off because of age, but that is okay in some cases if you
Right.
understand that's a non-negotiable. Like you have your reasoning for
Right.
not dating a guy who's much older than you, and you have your reasoning for dating a guy who's much younger, experience-wise.
Yeah.
But that's your non-negotiable.
But that's my personal non negotiable. For other people, that's not a big deal. And if that's not, and I think you really have to ask yourself in your heart of hearts, is that a non negotiable for me? Because, like this couple that I'm telling you about, they are amazing.
Mm.
And they are so well matched for each other. And he was even like, I don't know if I'm too old for you, whatever. And it's just such a match made in heaven. It truly is. And they would have missed out if either one of them had written each other off because of age.
So are you open to your changing your non-negotiable?
I'm not changing my non negotiable. I'm saying that you have to know what it is for you. And I think there's some people for whom, like, they just assume, like, oh, well, this is too old, this is too young, this is whatever, without getting to know the person, without it being a hard and firm non negotiable for them. And I'm not necessarily talking about like 10 years. Sometimes I'm talking about like 2 years.
Oh, is where people write people off.
Yeah.
Because I think you've given some guys opportunity from my understanding, right? Like older. Yeah, okay.
Not significantly older, but yeah.
Yeah.
A few years.
Nice. That's good.
So, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think about the age box?
Yeah, I'm in the space where I'm okay with the age gap. I don't mind dating a woman who's older, but like that's never happened. Like,
so you're looking for a cougar?
Yeah, I'm for cougars. Cougars are my type.
Cougars who are 5'7", slide in this man's DMs right now. Teasing, mostly.
Oh my gosh. But I guess also like I've dated younger girls too. Like, so I guess for me, I think people will give like on an outside perspective, be like, "Yo, Mickler, that's too young," for you type of thing. So I guess I don't know. Like I was like, no, I'll give her the opportunity. Like, if she's interested, I can. Like, supposedly men peak when they're like 30s or 40s type of thing, and it tracks younger women. So I'm like, okay, like if that's what I'm getting, then like I'm not gonna write her off because of the age thing. Like, I do want to assess character, and characters assessed like over time. Like, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I think for me, it would be an outsider's perspective, be like, yo, Mickler, no, type of
Yeah.
thing.
But I think that's healthy because for you, this is not a non-negotiable.
Okay. I see
So
what you're
going
saying.
back to John's boxes, like you might want somebody who's a certain age, but it's not a non-negotiable.
Yes. Because I
Versus,
understand the younger could be a little bit less inexperienced type of
yeah.
thing, and I have to work towards it, but I'm okay to try to.
And where you are in life, you're at a different place than I am.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So I think that for me, it's a non negotiable. For you, it's not. And that's totally okay. So going back to John's question, I really do think it comes down to like what boxes are non negotiables for you. So let's talk about another one, job. Like I've seen people write people off because of their job, which jobs can change. And like I know people who are like, oh, I wouldn't be with an entrepreneur that's way too unstable, whatever. Well, I've been one for 7 years. And it would be very helpful for me to have somebody who understands that journey.
Yes.
So I personally would like to be with somebody who's an entrepreneur. Doesn't necessarily have to be. I wouldn't say that's a huge non negotiable, but has to understand that life because that's the life that I live. And if you don't understand that life, then it's just very hard. So, but then on the flip side, like, and again, like I think there are exceptions to this. So, like one of the guys that I was matched with on a dating app last year, in the beginning, he worked for the police force and he did night shift. And so I kind of had to ask myself, like, could I handle that? Could I handle knowing that this man is in the line of fire while I'm sleeping? Like, would I be able to sleep? Because he had kind of one of those intense jobs. So, like, that's something that you have to know for yourself, or a firefighter, or a doctor who works crazy hours, or an entrepreneur, or somebody in the army, or a teacher, or, I mean, like, are at the end of the day these things really non-negotiables? Only you know. Only you know. And the thing is, jobs can change, salaries can change, like, and I have seen people write people off for that job box or industry or occupation or whatever that sometimes I think is unfounded, and yet you also have to know what's a non-negotiable for you. What would you say to that?
Yeah, so I think guys have the pressure of like, hey, I need to have a stable job and I need to have a stable career for me to attract the woman that God has for me. And I think that's why we strive to kind of have these things established before we put ourselves out there dating. But I've heard a lot of stories where like guys will be able to articulate like their vision and the thing that they're going after. They feel like, hey, God is calling me to this. Right now, I'm a janitor at Arby's, but
Mm-hmm.
God is calling me to do this.
Yeah.
And the woman will be like, let's do it, type of thing.
Yeah,
And
that matters more to me. Do you have a vision for your life?
yes.
Because you could be at a 9 to 5 with a stable job and a hefty paycheck and have no vision for your life, and I don't want any part of that.
Mm, mm,
And some of that is how I'm wired, right?
yeah,
As a
yeah.
visionary. At the same time, like, who would you rather join your life to? Like, you're not just joining your life to a paycheck.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And I don't know if we mentioned this, but it was like the idea of like, hey, when you get married, you become one. And it was like the physical aspect, but what I realized, it was like, no, it's also like a lifestyle thing. Like, what is the other person's lifestyle, and then your lifestyle, and are you guys able to mesh and put it to one? So what you were saying was like, hey, career wise, like if this man is a cop, for example, like, will I be able to sleep peacefully? Some women can, some women can't. Are you willing to, like, are you counting the cost, and are you willing to pay it, type of thing? Is
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
And if that's what God's called him to, then can you, whatever it is. And that's really what it boils down to for me. Like, what matters to me is that I am fulfilling my identity, my purpose, my calling on the earth, and that my husband is doing the same, and that we can
Mm.
champion each other in that process. And run together in that process, even if they're two different things. And so when I am getting to know somebody and I'm hearing about, like, I want to hear, what is it that God's put in your heart? If you can't articulate that to me, first of all, that's kind of a at least bright orange flag, if not red, right? Like, if you can't articulate that, maybe you don't know, maybe you're figuring it out, and that's fair. But where I'm at in life, if you don't know that by now, or you don't have some idea on that, that is a little bit of a red flag to me. But anyway, like, if you can articulate to me, this is who I am, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what God's called me to do, I can get behind that. If I see who you are, I see your identity, I see your purpose, I see your calling, and I say, yes, I can champion you as you run in that. Let's do that together. And the same for me. If I see somebody do that for me, that's a big deal, especially as a woman who is an entrepreneur. Like, a lot of guys are like, oh, that's cool. But when it comes down to it, they really want a woman who's barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. And don't want somebody, like, they want the strength and independence, but they want it, to look a certain way and whatever. And so again, you have to know what's right for you. And there are some women who are like, yes, please, I want to be home all day, every day. Like, I don't want to have to deal with any of this. And that's awesome. It comes down to, what has God called you to do? Because that is a calling as well. By the way, a more than full-time job. So, and I personally don't feel like you have to choose one or the other. I think you can have both. That's a whole other conversation. So I think that, yeah, it's, who is this person? Who has God called you to be? Do I see that? Can I champion that? Can I run alongside that? Like, everything that we're talking about, that really, from do you have fun together to do you see building a life together, that really comes to the two becoming one. Can your lives mesh? And do you want that? Do you see that? Do you see long term there? Um, it's way more than a lot of these little piddly boxes that I think a lot of times we get hung up on. What would you say to that?
Yeah, like I think what you're saying is just like, be clear on your specific non-negotiables, and with the box being checked. Like, for example, like, I guess going along with John's question, because he was saying like, do we exit the relationship before we kind of give it the opportunity and chance for it to grow? But like, if you're having this conversation with this guy, and he does like have like a whatever job, but you're asking him, hey, like, what has God put in your heart? And he's just like, oh, I just go to church Sunday, and do this thing, and
Good for
that's
you. Probably not for me, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. Okay, so then that's where it's like, okay, I am going to let you go, and not because that box not checked, because you
Mhm.
understand, like, hey, I want you to be able to at least have some type of idea for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, back to John's question, like, it really depends on what the boxes are. And I do think we have to be open. I think we have to be more open-minded. Again, we've talked about this before, whether it's occupation or location or height or, fill
Mm.
in the blank, people group. I don't know, like, just so many things. Sometimes we get in our little boxes. Speaking of boxes, we get in our little boxes of like, this is how the person has to look. And God loves breaking boxes. So, I know so many stories of, like, well, even, Jared and Yomaris, who we had last week, like,
Yeah, yeah.
that was not what either of them expected. So I think we have to be prepared that very often it doesn't look like what we expect. And very often with God, it comes outside of our comfort zone, which includes being open. And so I do think we have to be open and not so tied to a list, not so tied to boxes that we're not open when God brings somebody into our lives. At the same time, we are powerful to choose. And because it is two becoming one, I think that you just have to know for you what those non-negotiable boxes are and what that looks like. And if those non-negotiables are not there for you, I do think it's okay to walk away, because there's going to be disappointment, there's going to be resentment. Like, you can't build a healthy relationship that way. And so so I think there's that, like, I know this is kind of like a gray answer, but I feel like it's a gray area. I feel like there's that balance between, like, open, okay, Lord, whatever you have, I'm open, and I'm going to be willing to get to know somebody who maybe doesn't fit, X, Y, and Z, as far as like type or whatever. And yet at the same time, because like one can put 1,000 to flight, two can put 10,000 to flight. Like, we're not just talking about marriage here, we're talking about kingdom marriage.
Yeah.
And that's powerful and that matters. And so I do think it's okay to know what your non-negotiables are and be upfront about that and be honest with yourself and with the other person. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. So I think that's like, okay, for the individual, like right now, we can step into power to be like, hey, like, okay, this is my non-negotiable. I'm sorry you didn't check the box. Like, I'm not going to move forward with this relationship.
Yeah.
And we're hoping kind of like both sides will be able to do that. But
both sides should do that.
yes. Yeah. But in that, like, what if the other person isn't open for that opportunity to be like, hey, I'm going to break your box. And then it's like, I am going to eject. Like, the person, God wants to break the box, but the person is like, no, I don't want to. So I'm just going to like cut this person off. Now it's just like, now the person just has to steward their kind of own heart and take it up with the Lord and be like, hey, grieve in the sense, or like.
Well, that's a tough one. And I guess, like, what comes up for me when you say that is the news anchor that I dated, who I dated for 2 years, and I really loved him, and I thought we were moving towards marriage, and he wasn't able to leave and cleave. Like, he lived with his mom and worked a bunch of jobs to pay off her student loans, and in the end, she was concerned about change, and he chose her over me. And for him, that was a non-negotiable. And for me, that sucked, because I was like, that's just basic, like, you leave your mother and father, cleave to your wife. Like, it's right, it's in red letters, No, it's not rocket science. And I did have to take that up with the Lord. And yet at the same time, like, like Jackie says, that like rejection is God's protection. And so I really do see how that wouldn't have been the right relationship. I'm not saying it couldn't have been, but there were other boxes that I was willing to leave unchecked. So some of those were that, he lived in a small town and he kind of was small-minded in some of his thinking, whereas I'm an adventurer and I'm an explorer, and I don't really love big cities, but like just thinking bigger than like this little corner of the world. And so I kind of left that box unchecked because I don't know, it was something I was willing to overlook at the time. And now looking back, I'm like, no, actually, that is something that matters to me. Like, I need somebody who has a bigger view of the world. And so anyway, I'm rambling now, but I think that while it was not a non-negotiable for me, and it was for him, and we had to like navigate that, and I was very, very heartbroken in the process, I trust God. I guess that's what it really boils down to, is I trust God, and I see ways in which that wouldn't have probably been a healthy situation, and I never could have lived with his mother long term. That never would have worked. That's not who I am. So
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, yeah. No, amen, amen. Yeah, no, I just kind of wanted to paint the picture of like both sides, where it was like, hey, we might be in the position where I I
Mm.
can be checking off some boxes, but give them another opportunity because they don't fit in this box. Or what,
Mm.
like you mentioned, like, hey, location, height,
Mhm.
hobbies, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like, I might be the person getting written off. But if that's the case, then I trust God, I move forward, I persevere. Romans 8:18.
8:28.
Wait, what?
8:28.
Oh, 8:28.
Yeah, you're quoting Deuteronomy 8:18. That's all right.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a scholar, okay?
No, you're good. You're good. Well, I think there too, like that person, even though it hurts, even though there's grieving, even though there's healing, what that person actually did is for you to move forward.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, if you're not both in agreement, like how can any two walk unless they be in agreement, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
you can't walk if you're not in agreement. You can't build a life together if you're not in agreement. And so if there is not an agreement, and again, maybe it's not a non-negotiable for you, but it is for them, then you're not in agreement. And at the end of the day, that wouldn't be healthy for either of you. So as much as it sucks, as much as it's hard and painful and there's a healing journey to walk out, still, like, what did God just free you up for? What did he just now open up for you? For both
Mhm,
of you.
mhm. Yeah. Okay. So then, should we as Christians have a type? Should we have these boxes?
Ugh. I I know we gotta land the plane, but I think that I do not think there is anything wrong with going to the Lord and saying, "Hey, this is what I want." Because I believe that He gives us the desires of our heart, includes putting the desires there that He wants to fulfill. And if there's a
Yes,
desire in you for something specific in your spouse, I believe there's a reason. I think the important part is to give it to the Lord with an open hand. I think that's where it comes in.
I agree.
You
Because
know?
because what if I don't know if this is a concept that's going around in church or whatever, but it was like God will give you what you need, not what you want. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
sound right. That's like
But there's both because he cares
I
about the details.
I agree.
And
Yes,
like,
1000%.
and I think that he'll even put the desire in you for what you need.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. So he'll change
You
and transform some of
know?
the type that we may have, or these boxes over time as well.
Yeah, I think the important thing is not to be like glued to a list. Not like, okay, if
Yeah.
this person doesn't fit it, it's not. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying to the Lord, hey, this is what I want. These are the desires that I have. As long as, then you give it to the Lord with an open hand. And then as far as the boxes, I actually think it's really important to know what your non-negotiables are.
Yeah.
And which ones are the ones that could be unchecked. Maybe it's hair color, maybe it's, like, maybe it's not green eyes. No, I'm teasing you. Um, but like, know which ones, what they eat on pizza. I don't know. Like, which ones can you let slide, and which ones are truly non-negotiable for you.
Mm.
And then you'll know when you get into a relationship, like, hey, this is actually something that's really important to me. We're actually not on the same page spiritually about this, and that really matters to me. We're
Yes.
actually not on the same page about kids. We're not on the same page about like some of these like bigger issues that could cause issues in your marriage. We're not on the same page about finances. We're not on the same page about like let's get real and talk about some of the real things that destroy marriages.
Mhm, mhm.
We're not on the same page about, fill in the blank, like the big things. Know those. Those are your non negotiables. And, and it's okay, I think, to have some of the other ones, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm being biased, but like age or, like you said, like lifestyle, I think that's an important one.
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of bigger things, and then know what some of the other ones are, and like not liking the same sports team or not having all the same hobbies or whatever, like know what you can let slide and be open where you need to be open, and don't be afraid to choose what really matters to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty much like as an individual, take some time with the Lord to get really clear about what you desire,
Yeah.
about what you are looking for in a wife. And then you may have to ask yourself some hard questions or ask, like God to reveal some of your, heart. Like, is this a superficial want or
Yeah.
is there a deeper
Yeah.
desire for it type
Like,
of
is
thing?
this truly a non-negotiable for me?
Yeah. Or is it something that I can let go with an open hand, as you
Yeah.
mentioned?
Yeah. And I mean, like, I'll just be real. I've asked God for a husband with great abs and great arms. So,
Great abs, great arms. If you're out there, hit up Rachel. Let's go.
I mean, and
Our
that's like,
Instagram handles are in the description below. No, I'm just-
that is true. So like at the end of the day, is that a huge deal breaker for me? No, but it is a desire of my heart, and I believe that God cares about that. Now, on the flip side, what am I doing to steward myself
yes.
to attract a man like that? And so that I am stewarding myself to the best of my ability, just like I want him to steward himself to the best of his ability.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that too.
1000%. Yes, ma'am. Cool. I was like, could we talk about some of the things that we? No, I think we did.
I mean, I said one. You already said green eyes, so green eyes, who's 5'7".
Oh my gosh. No, I actually like what you said too, where some women may not necessarily want to be just like staying at home all the time. And that's like something I think a lot of us believers will assume like that's what the woman wants to do. But it's like Proverbs 31, like the woman was really good with her hands. Like she created things, like she sold things, like she
Yeah,
was in business, but
she
she
was.
also was really loving and caring and served her family really well. Like, like I think the woman can do both, but then there's just like this pushback on like, women, oh no, like if you're a masculine man, like you provide and all that stuff, and the woman is at home and just taking care of the family. I think it's right, but also like a woman can be entrepreneurial in the sense, but like if the guy understands that, like what they want, or the woman and the guy have this conversation, like I think that's very good to have, like
It's important.
yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, I know stay-at-home moms making 6 and 7 figures on the regular.
Ooh,
You know them
yeah.
too.
That's
they're,
right.
they're friends of ours, and so like I don't think you have to choose, but you have to know if that is a non-negotiable for you
Hmm.
in a relationship, one way or the other.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay.
lots of thoughts. So clearly, we don't have the definitive answer. We're
Yeah.
just sharing our input because I don't know that there is like, oh, this is the answer. I don't know that that really exists. So
Hmm.
I just think this was a good, hopefully helpful, honest conversation, kind of talking through our thoughts and like verbal processing it out together.
Yeah. Most definitely. If it's been helpful, give this video a like. Definitely share it with someone who is on a dating journey, trying to find that one that God has for them by by becoming the one.
There
And
you go.
it's right.
I was like, oh, don't get me started on that.
Yeah, so should we have a type? I think we can have a type. I think we can have some boxes, but just being very, very clear as to what these are, but also kind of like being willing to be like, Okay, God, I give this completely to you. If you want to just rip that checklist off, then I am willing because I love you and you know what's best for me, type of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So, yeah, so take a moment and share this with somebody you know who would benefit from this conversation today. And let us know, what do you want to hear us talk about? We would love that. That's what inspired this episode today. And obviously, there's a lot further we could go with this, but we will land the plane here. Thank you for sticking with us. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.